Machine has appeared in homes across America.
Double and redouble his power. 32X.
6 times more powerful than 3DO. 40 times more than Super NES.
Hey, yo! There is no 32-bit Super NES. Are we gonna see the games or what? Show me!
Increase the power of the unit 40 times.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've heard a lot of negative things about the Sega 32X. Well, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kick off a 3-part series detailing Sega 32X games that are worth playing today. So let's get started.
Attention all wing pilots. Stand by to receive orders. Wipe out enemy fighters.
Star Wars is cool, man. It was actually developed for the arcade by Sega, and it was developed for their Model 1 system in the arcade. And so that's the same exact system and hardware that powered Virtual Fighter and Virtual Racing. Which means all of Star Wars Arcade on the 32X, everything is rendered in polygons, using polygons. The game looks great, in my opinion. I love it. It is the very first game that I did play on my 32X, so there might be some nostalgia there for me. But I do think that, objectively, it is a very good game, and it's one worth playing today. There is some repetitive gameplay, of course. It's an arcade game. You know, that's what it is. Back in the day, back then, everything was chasing the arcade. And so to me it was very impressive to see this come out so soon. Star Wars arcade game on the 32X. Man, it's a blast. And let me tell you something, it's a challenge too. So, you know, if you like those games that are challenging but fun, Star Wars arcade would be right down your alley. And it's not, you know, it's so much fun that even though you get killed over and over again, and, you know, it gets pretty tough there, especially around the middle rounds and the middle stages there. But it's fun enough to keep me interested anyway. So I would highly recommend Star Wars, the arcade game, for the Sega 32X, and I would play it any way you can. And again, we wanted to port some of those great arcade games home to our home consoles. That was a big deal back then. And I think that the 32X really gets overlooked in that area, because they did bring Afterburner Complete to the home console, to the 32X, and this version is awesome. It's very similar to Afterburner 2 in the arcade. You know, they had to make a few tweaks to it, of course. Bringing it to a home console, you're going to give it a difficulty level, which is good because this game is tough. And you can bump up the amount of ships you have and, you know, turn the difficulty down a little bit. There are times, you know, when you'll blow up, your plane will get destroyed, and you have no idea where the hit came from. And you'll be flying too, especially kind of in the middle levels. You know, there'll be some missiles coming at you from behind, and you've got to steer out of the way. You can do barrel rolls. You know, this game is just pure fun and pure adrenaline, man. Great soundtrack. The graphics are awesome. That pseudo 3D sprite scaling effect is just amazing, and the 32X just handled this game perfectly. So when you hear that there are no good games for the 32X, yeah, that's baloney. You can tell them, you know what, play Afterburner Complete, because that game rocks. So I highly recommend, of course, if you have a Sega 32X, grab Afterburner Complete and play it, man. It is so good. It's like having the arcade game, you know, in your home. It's awesome.
Virtual Racing.
Virtual Racing Deluxe is yet another arcade port to the 32X. But this one is, well, it's done very well, and it's enhanced. You have more options on the Deluxe version, on the 32X version of this game, than you would at the arcade. You get your formula car, of course, you get a stock car, and you get a prototype car. So you get 2 additional cars that were not included in the arcade. You also get all 3 tracks that were included in the arcade, plus 2 exclusive tracks to the 32X. So the only way you can play Highland and Sand Park tracks is on the 32X. So they didn't just, port the game over and call it good. No, they actually enhanced it and gave you a reason to play this game and added some playability to the game. The game runs super smooth, just unbelievably smooth, and just is a lot of fun to look at and to play. Man, if you like racing games and you own a 32X, don't hesitate to get Virtual Racing Deluxe. One thing is, it is also one of the cheapest and most available 32X game out there. So yeah, definitely, man. This game is just a blast, and I'll tell you what, I sat down just to kind of record the footage on here, and I played for way longer than what I needed to just provide as footage for this video. So I love this game. It took me a couple of times playing it, and it took me a while to pick it up. I wish I would have just picked it up a lot earlier, because it's a great game. So Virtual Racing Deluxe on the Sega 32X. Man, play it any way you can. Last week we talked about 3 awesome arcade ports brought home to the Sega Genesis through the Sega 32X. And today we're going to cover 3 more great arcade ports that are worth playing today on your Sega 32X. So without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome to NBA Jam!
In 1995, NBA Jam Tournament Edition was released for the Sega 32X. Of course, it was released on several consoles. It was also released on the PC as well. And there really isn't a whole lot I can tell you about NBA Jam Tournament Edition that you probably already don't know. But what I can tell you is that the 32X version is one of the best. And a lot of people didn't play this version, of course, because they didn't have a Sega 32X. But if you do have a 32X, or if you're thinking about picking one up, make sure and get NBA Jam Tournament Edition for the 32X. It is awesome. And I will tell you that there is a video by Genovi out there that really digs deep into all the different ports, and it really compares them, and I mean, he goes into depth. Of course, Genovi's amazing, and I'll leave a link to his video in the description, of course. But this is a solid port, man. The sound effects, music, pretty good. But the graphics, the speed of the game, the playability, how fast you can play a game, of course it's a great pick up and play game. Some of the other versions though, and if you watch Genovi's video you'll see this, take longer to play a game. And this is an arcade game, man. You want to pick it up and play and go. And the Sega 32X and the Atari Jaguar, in my opinion, have the best 2 ports of NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and I would put the Sega 32X under the Atari Jaguar. But man, I'll tell you what, it's a great port. If you have a Sega 32X, you're thinking about picking one up, man, pick up NBA Jam Tournament Edition. You will not be disappointed.
Boom shakalaka! Boom shakalaka! Slam it!
Welcome to the
In 1994, Sega released Space Harrier for the Sega 32X. And man, this is a near perfect arcade port of the 1985 arcade game Space Harrier. What a great game this is. You know, really at the time this was the best version of Space Harrier that you could play. It really did a great job. The color palette is spot on. The sound effects and music are on point. And man, it runs at a very smooth, fast frame rate as well. Now there are some frame rate drops, of course, when there's too many sprites on the screen, but man, I don't notice it. Just to being able to play this game at home and being able to play a near arcade perfect port at home was awesome, man. That's one thing that the Sega 32X did, and we saw that in the first 3 games in the first part of this video series, is port some really great arcade games home to the Sega 32X. And as far as that goes, the add-on, the 32X, was not a failure in my eyes as far as what it could do, and it was a budget way to get into a 32-bit system. And just remember, there was no 32-bit SNES. So man, if you get a chance to play Space Harrier on the 32X, do it, because it is a great port and it is just a blast. In 1995, Sega continues its legacy of bringing arcade games home to the Sega Genesis. And it brings home Virtua Fighter to the 32X. Now it looks better on the Saturn, but I'll tell you what, the 32X version is not as buggy as the Saturn version. And it plays fantastic, man. It's got a great frame rate, it plays great. Man, I'll tell you what, you start playing it and it does feel like, you know, once you start getting into it and getting into the moves and playing it, it feels like you're playing the arcade game. It really does. Of course, it doesn't look as good as the arcade, and it's not 100%, of course. But man, it is a great port. And I'll tell you what, if you own a Sega 32X, you have no reason not to pick up Virtua Fighter. Because it is one of the cheapest and one of the most common games you can get for your Sega 32X. So I do really feel like the 3 games that we featured in Part 2 and the 3 games that were featured in Part 1 give you plenty of reason to pick up a Sega 32X if you get a chance, man. It is a blast, and the Sega 32X is a really unique experience. So if you have a 32X, man, I highly recommend Virtua Fighter. Welcome to part 3 in our 3-part video series of Sega 32X games worth playing today. So the first 2 parts of this series, we looked at 6 great arcade ports that were brought home to the Sega 32X and are worth playing today. And today we're going to look at 2 games. One is a popular PC game that was ported to the Sega 32X, and the other one is an original game for the Sega 32X. These 2 games are great, and I do feel like they're worth playing today, so let's get started. November of 1994 saw the release of Doom on the Sega 32X, and it's a good version of Doom. Yes, you do have a border around your window, but the frame rate is good. It's very playable. The Jaguar version was superior, and this is based on the Jaguar version. But there are a few differences, of course. The border around the window, of course, that's one of them. All the monsters in the 32X version are front-facing. There's no infighting. But you know what? I tell you what, this was a good way to play it. Good frame rate, very playable, and very fun. If you want to just grab a Doom cartridge, throw it in the 32X and fire it up and play, man, it's great. Great pick-up and play aspect to this game. And at the time, this was one of the very few ways you could play this on a home console. And, you know, not to throw any shade towards the Super NES, but I would certainly rather play Doom on the 32X than the Super Nintendo. It just... the Super Nintendo's frame rate and the slowness of the game, and of course they cut out like the gore. Yeah, that just isn't a good experience to me. A lot of people love it on the SNES, but in my opinion, the 32X version is far superior. So, yeah, Doom on the 32X is worth owning today and worth playing today. May of 1995 saw the release of Shadow Squadron for the 32X. A lot of people say this is their favorite Sega 32X game, and I can certainly see why. It is a really great space flight simulator, and it's got a lot of replayability and a lot of options and different ways to play the game too. So when you start the game up, you can choose from Feather 1 or Feather 2, two different spaceships. Feather 1 is fast, nimble, but cannot take a lot of damage and doesn't have as much energy as Feather 2. Feather 2, on the other hand, has a big old cannon on the front of it. And you can play that. You can play Feather 2 by piloting it, or you can put it on autopilot and just operate the guns. So at that point it would become like an on-rails shooter. So you can play it in several different ways. Man, it's a lot of fun. I mean, just a really good time. The graphics are amazing. Sound is awesome. The soundtrack is great. And, you know, and I don't know if you were like me and liked Battlestar Galactica back in the day as a kid and watching those dogfights in space. That was the coolest part of that show to me. And I always kind of, you know, wanted a game to emulate that, and this is pretty close. This is a excellent showcase for the Sega 32X. Man, if there's any way you can play this game, do it. This is absolutely worth playing today, and a great way to end this series and wrap this series up. We're going to do it with, I think, probably the best game on the list, and that is Shadow Squadron. Thanks for joining me today, and if you like this series and you think that I've earned it, give the video a thumbs up please. And if you're not subscribed to the channel but you'd like to see more of my content, make sure and hit that subscribe button. I hope you guys have a great and safe rest of your day.